All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Danny Lindemood, and I am the program manager with the Wellington Water Watchers. And it is my pleasure to be here with you this evening in support of Get Concerned Stratford. Just before we get started, I'm just going to give a quick couple reminders for the Zoom. You have been muted, and we don't have the capabilities to have you unmute tonight, but you are more than welcome to use the chat to communicate with us. Please go ahead and introduce yourself in there, say hello, where you're joining from, and if you have any questions that you hope are going to be answered tonight. The other note is that we do have closed captions available, so you can go ahead and turn those on for yourself by clicking this live transcript button there. And if you need anything, on the slide it says that you can email Megan at wellingtonwaterwatchers.ca, but just email info@wellingtonwaterwatchers.ca and it'll come to me and we'll get you some help if you need it. All right, so we're going to get started here this evening um, with Melissa. So I'm just going to pass it over to you.
Good evening. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us tonight. My name is Melissa Verspieten, and I'm the spokesperson for Get Concerned Stratford. Tonight, we plan to provide updates to you on information we've discovered and communication we've had with the mayor and city of Stratford. We'll talk to you about meeting with MPP Randy Pettipies, which sparked us to book a meeting with John Nader for Monday, January 11th. We invited Mayor Mathieson to speak at this meeting, just as we have at all three of our previous meetings. On previous occasions, he's declined to speak, although he joined the meetings to listen. Mayor Mathieson is listening in, and we're going to give him the opportunity to speak after David Donnelly and Mike Sullivan. We've also invited all councillors to join the meeting and listen in on the discussion. A rundown of where we are now. The mayor has made a commitment to provide at least 7 days of notice to council convening to vote on the cost sharing and site plan agreements. We're entering a critical stage in the campaign to say no to the Xinyi proposal, and the vote may come to council this month. Since the last meeting, many of you have been contacting the mayor and councillors and sending us emails with information about your conversations. Thank you so incredibly much for that. It appears that the mayor is in favor of the Xinyi proposal and is working hard to secure enough votes for it to pass. We believe 4 councillors are opposed to the Xinyi proposal, 3 are undecided, and 3 councillors side with the mayor in supporting the Xinyi proposal. 6 votes are needed to defeat the proposal. Together, we must secure 2 more councillors' votes to oppose this proposal with the 4 councillors who currently oppose it. The strategy for how we get those 2 councillors on side to oppose this will be an important part of tonight's discussion. We have some recommendations we'll make and in the action plan portion of the agenda, and we'll also be asking for your ideas. It's important for you to know that the Energy and Environment Committee and the Civic Beautification and Environmental Awareness Committee of the City of Stratford have passed resolutions opposing the Xinyi proposal. We instructed our lawyer, David Donnelly, to write to the mayor and council with a number of concerns, and David Donnelly will speak to this in tonight's meeting and answer your questions. Mike Sullivan and I met with MPP Randy Pettipies, and Mike Sullivan is going to report on that, as well as a number of updates on other issues. Community opposition continues to grow. We've provided 750 lawn signs. The post office started distributing today a leaflet to every home, business, and farm in Stratford, a total of 17,500 addresses. Lorena McKenna and Wise Communities continue their vigorous advocacy, and Lorena is going to speak tonight and update us on the next steps in the Wise Communities Action Plan. Leslie Walker Fitzpatrick and Peggy Coffey have started a daily noon-hour vigil at City Hall, and Leslie will describe to you tonight how that's going and invite you to join her and Peggy. Attendance at these community meetings continues to grow. We've had more than 600 people RSVP for tonight's meeting, and everyone, including those who aren't able to attend, will receive a recording of the meeting. Now I'm going to turn this over to Mike Bockwell, the campaign director at Wellington Water Watchers. Get Concerned Stratford has again asked him to facilitate this meeting, so I'm going to hand it over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm just going to look at the agenda slide you have in front of us. Melissa has reviewed the agenda. I'm just going to talk briefly about how we're going to do the meeting. In a moment, I'm going to go to Mike Sullivan as our first speaker, and we encourage you, he may choose to answer unanswered questions himself through the chat box. Then, as Melissa mentioned, David Donnelly will present. And similarly, if you have questions, put them in the chat box, and we'll address those to David as they come in after his presentation. As Melissa mentioned, the mayor is apparently listening in, and at that moment, we're going to stop and ask the mayor if he wishes to respond to any of the information that's been brought forward in the updates. Then we'll go to the action plan. Each of the speakers will speak. Again, we'll have questions. We'll have some things we can put in the chat box for you to take, actions you can take, and we'll talk about where we go from here. So that's the plan. And I'm going to ask Mike Sullivan if he'll join us on screen. So are you there, Mike?
I am here. I hope everybody can hear me. So thank you for joining us tonight. I understand there were almost 600 or maybe more than 600 replies. I'm not sure how many people actually are here, but it's amazing and I appreciate it. One of the things we have discovered in the course of reviewing the documents is that there's space for two factories. You may recall one of the previous meetings, someone pointed out a big green field next to the factory in one of the drawings. So that's the first slide, and you can see the drawing of the factory. I noticed that the drawing, this is from the Xinyi documents that were prepared by a consulting firm. And item 6, this big open space, it says vacant there. Well, if you go to the next slide, please. First, I wanted to show you just how big is this space. That red blob at the bottom left corner, that's an overhead view of the city of Stratford. And the red blob at the bottom left corner is the size of the Xinyi site. It dwarfs anything else in Stratford, absolutely everything else. It's bigger than the golf course. It's bigger than the entire shopping district at the east end of the city. And you can see the little black dots there. They actually are bigger than they really are the various studios. And this glass factory dwarfs everything about Stratford. Next slide, please. So what I showed you was the green space. And if you see the little numbers on the bottom, that's surrounding the plant as it will be built. The thing on the right of this is a dormitory, or was to be a dormitory and a cafeteria. And the railroad goes up on the left. Now the next slide, in very, very faint gray lettering on the far left of this, that big green space is labeled phase 2. And the gray space above the dormitory is a future phase, which means they intend to build another dormitory and another cafeteria and another factory or something. Phase 2 has not been developed, but Xinyi will own the land. And once one is up, it'll be impossible to stop a second one, in my opinion. So if you thought it was bad with one glass factory, just imagine what it will be like with 2 glass factories, using twice as much water, putting twice as much stuff in the air, putting twice as much greenhouse gases in the air, so it will triple Stratford's greenhouse gas emissions, and needing another bunch of temporary foreign workers, maybe. There is no timeline for phase 2, but it's clear that that's the reason that they bought enough land to put a phase 2 on, because they intend to put a phase 2 on. The city knows about phase 2 because it was mentioned in the first letter from the mayor to the minister. So it's not like this has been hidden from the city, although it's kind of faint on the drawings. Next slide, please. These notes are taken directly from the City of Stratford website. Each paragraph is from a different place, so apologies for it being stringing together, but the City of Stratford website is a hodgepodge of information that is very difficult to flow around. The first paragraph is that additional information is being requested from Xinyi Glass. That information isn't there yet. It is there yet. It's hard to know. We know that council was going to ask Xinyi Glass at a special meeting set up. That meeting was canceled. It hasn't been rescheduled. And we understand from comments that the mayor made that Xinyi Glass intends to have another public meeting sometime in the new year. We don't know when. The City of Stratford, as far as we know, has no intention of having a public meeting of its own on this. Then we get to, well, when did the council know about this? So the second paragraph, members of Stratford City Council were advised at a high level in the fall of 2018. And then in November of 2018, the city entered into a non-binding letter of intent. Very important that it says non-binding. It means that, I think it means that the city could just say, well, we don't like you anymore. We're not going to do this. Then the next question was, when did the public know? And in December 2018, a determination was made by City Council to further investigate the opportunities for the proposed development. The public was not involved because Council had few specific details, yet they'd already signed a letter of intent. It is strange to believe that the city didn't think the public should know as far back as December of 2018. And yet, in November of 2018, the mayor wrote to the minister seeking a ministerial zoning order and included phase 2 in his request. Next slide, please. Continuing with information that is on the city's website, this isn't amended, the highlighting is mine, obviously, but this is directly on the City of Stratford's website. On November 20th, the city, together with Perth County and the Township of Perth South, sought assistance in obtaining a ministerial zoning order. So we know exactly when that was. And we know that not because of anything the city proffered to us, it was because the minister and his staff leaked it to the media sometime in December or in November of this year. So the media got it, and now the City of Stratford had to put it up on their website because it was no longer a secret. It was a secret until the media got it. Then there was a question, and you folks have all asked this question, when are they going to put solar panels on? And so Xinyi's answer, this next quote, the next paragraph is Xinyi's answer. The facility is designed and ready to install such solar incentive system once an incentive program is in place. They're not going to put solar panels up until some government pays for it, either the federal or provincial. Why are we being asked to pay for them to be environmentally conscious? It beggars belief. The City of Stratford is, in the last paragraph on this page, additional public sessions are also being scheduled in the new year by the company to present the proposal for development for public comment. Again, that's the reference that apparently, although the city is not going to have a public meeting, we Get Concerned Stratford are, Xinyi apparently is going to have a public meeting. Next slide, please. The city, this is new information. So at the end of December, Melissa and I wrote to the mayor and said, exactly what restrictions are on you and City Council? What have you signed? What have you agreed to? What we got back was a letter from the clerk saying, please look at the website. So we went to look at the website, and on December 31st, this was posted. The city did enter into a binding letter of intent with Xinyi Glass Canada as it relates to the float glass manufacturing facility. Similar to all bindings letter of intent entered into by the city, any obligations are conditional upon approval of the agreement by Stratford City Council. So we think it's binding with conditions, but we're not 100% certain, but it certainly changed from two pages ago. I showed you that they signed a non-binding letter of intent in November of 2018. And they posted that fact on their website on December 10th of 2018, or around December 10th of 2020. So between December 10th of 2020 and December 31st, now we have a binding letter of intent. Did they sign that in those 3 weeks? Is that really what happened? We don't know. We also asked if counselors were muzzled, if counselors were being prevented from speaking. And what we got back was city councilors can make statements they consider appropriate and in keeping with their obligations as an elected member of council. And what we've been told by counselors is, by some counselors, is that they can't be specific about anything that went on because they are under a non-disclosure agreement or some kind of restriction like a non-disclosure agreement that prevents them from speaking freely about what the terms are, what the dates that they agreed to stuff is. Any of that is not able to be spoken about by counselors. So it's in keeping with their obligations as elected member of council means that we've got them tied up so bad they can't say very much at all. Next slide, please. If there is a next slide. No, there isn't a next slide. So I'm just going to speak now. We have today sent a leaflet, nice front and back 8.5 by 17 piece of paper to every house, farm, business, and apartment in Stratford and around Stratford. I'm hoping that there won't be any suggestion, as there has been, that not very many people know about this. Everybody's going to know about this now. We did meet with the MPP, Randy Pettipies. And in that meeting, one of the key questions we asked him, and you'll recall that this all started because people were so upset about a ministerial zoning order and the implication that the minister had just imposed this on the city of Stratford, when in fact, it was the city of Stratford who asked for it. What we asked Mr. Pettipies was, if the city of Stratford didn't want it anymore, if they wanted to actually go through the democratic and fair process of a planning application by Xinyi or by anybody for putting something on those lands, what could they do about it? And his answer was quite simple. He said, they just have to ask the minister to rescind it, and he will. If city council votes to rescind the MZO, it will be rescinded by the minister, no question. That's in keeping with the minister's public statements that all MZOs were after a full and transparent vote of the council to ask for it. We haven't been able to find any reference in any council minutes that are public to the vote by council to ask the mayor to seek an MZO. They don't exist in public minutes. So we have to assume that they're in the in-camera portion of the city council. When you look at the in-camera minutes, you cannot tell what is being discussed. The city's procedural bylaw requires them to give a general description of the item being discussed. Instead, all they do is list the rules for exceptions in the act and say, we're not, this item has to do with, they don't say what the general nature of the item is. They just say, we are discussing something that is protected by solicitor-client privilege, or we are protecting something, discussing something that is identifiable of an individual. And there is no indication what it's about. I sent a letter to the city to start a investigation by an investigative officer of whether or not the materials that were in camera were legally in camera. But because you can't tell what's being discussed at any in-camera meeting, because it is such a vague announcement, I had to tell the investigating officer that it could be any meeting between September of 2018 and today. And he then wrote back and said, well, that's too vague. I need more detail. And I wrote back to him and said, you can't get more detail because the city of Stratford doesn't give you enough detail. We've worked out an arrangement where he's going to start looking until he finds something. The other issue, besides it being a secret, is that, and besides the city not following its own procedural bylaw, is that it's my view that voting to ask the minister for an MZO should never have been done in secret. It should have been done in public back in November of 2018 or whenever it was done. And so we've asked the investigating officer, who is a lawyer at the firm of Aird Bearless, to determine for us whether or not this matter is a matter that he would agree should be in an open meeting. Does it meet with the open meeting determinations? And we'll see what he says. That investigation will take its course. In the meantime, Melissa and I have, as a result of our meeting with Mr. Pettipies, have decided to have another meeting with John Nader, our MP. And there are a number of issues that are of a federal nature. One is the use of temporary foreign workers. We've asked him to investigate how many they've applied for and for how long. Have they applied for 320 temporary foreign workers for 5 years? We don't know, and nobody's saying. We have asked him to find out whether the Harper era law that gives investors protection from a foreign country, investors are protected against losing profits by actions of governments. They can sue governments if they've lost their profits. Well, recently, the government of Canada announced that it's increasing the carbon tax to $170 a ton over the next, I believe it's 10 years. If that happens, is Xinyi exempt from that carbon tax because of that law that protects their investment and protects their profits? It would be horribly, horribly unfair to all the other businesses in Stratford and everywhere else in Ontario if Xinyi were exempt from paying that carbon tax while everybody else had to pay it. And we've also, we'll be asking Mr. Nader to comment on the national security issues that were raised by Lorena McKenna in her letter to the Minister of Innovation federally. So I'm probably supposed to speak about other things, but I can't remember what they are. So I'm going to pass it now on to, I believe it's Lorena McKenna who is speaking next.
No,
sorry, it's David Donnelly.
Slow down. Slow down. We have a couple.
Oh, there might be questions?
There might be questions. So first of all, I want to say thank you, Mike. And there's been a lot of questions in the chat box already. Now, the thing is, a whole group of those questions are actually addressed to the mayor. So I hope he's reading the chat box, and I hope he'll consider speaking to them soon. Another whole set of questions, really, I think, are questions that David Donnelly, the lawyer, is best placed to answer, and we'll hold those until after David Donnelly. There's a couple of questions, though, Mike, that I think you can speak to. A couple of people have asked, who actually owns the Xinyi land right now?
My understanding is the Van Ness family owns the Xinyi land. And I've got that understanding from farmers who live around the land, most notably Jamie Gibb, who's on the Gibb Concerned Stratford committee. And it's our understanding, though we don't have this as gospel, that there has been no exchange of money yet about that land. Xinyi has not actually purchased it. Now, our understanding of that information comes from a meeting we had with the mayor. So if the mayor is accurate in telling us that that the city of Stratford has nothing to do with ownership of this land, that it is all private land, and that there is a conditional offer that will be exercised at some point in the future. That's what we know. It's one parcel. It's owned by the Van Ness family, we understand.
Thanks, Mike. There's a couple of other questions which are not for you to answer, but I'm going to speak to. Bev Carlisle says, I'm worried I haven't got my leaflet yet. So should she be worried? Should she be
No.
worried? Mike, tell us about your delivery to the post office.
So this morning at 9:15, I went to the back door of the post office and dropped off 17,530 leaflets. And the post office then, because this is called neighborhood mail, it is delivered as the carriers can carry it. So these are heavy parcels, and it may take them 2 or 3 days, but over the next 2 or 3 days between now and Tuesday, you should all get a copy of this leaflet.
And someone else said, was noticing that there's 268 people who are signed into this meeting. And I want to clarify that that's actually 268 devices. So if there's more than one person sitting in front of a computer, there are more participants. And when people RSVP for the meeting, they RSVP by the number of people who they expect to be logging into the meeting. So 600 people RSVP. Currently, there are 268 devices. So that's, easily in excess of close to 600 people. So I just want to clarify that. And Mike, we're going to switch to David Donnelly in a minute. I'm giving him a heads up. And you may wish to look at the questions in the chat box if there's any you want to respond to. And please note the praise and appreciation that's in the chat box for all the hard work that you're doing. So thank you. And David Donnelly, we're going to call you now to the screen. If you can log on with your video and your microphone.
Hi, Mike. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine. Go ahead.
Great. Well, thank you very much to the two mics and to Get Stratford for allowing me this opportunity to speak tonight. I have been retained by Get Stratford to do some initial legal research regarding such things as the MZO, some of the environmental issues and concerns, and in particular, we have sent 2 letters to the mayor and council looking for specific answers to questions around disclosure of information. We've asked questions about the MZO, and in particular, we're looking for some responses regarding the greenhouse gas emissions. Our firm is an environmental and municipal firm. We've done many projects across Ontario, including representing the Get Concerned group in Guelph Aramosa, who successfully convinced their council not to allow Xinyi to locate within their municipality. So if we can begin the PowerPoint presentation, my presentation is really a question and answer session. Our firm has been instructed to write 2 letters to the mayor and council. The first was delivered on December the 4th, 2020. That letter made clear our opinion with respect to the council's ability to deny Xinyi its approval. The second letter was sent as a result of that letter. We did not receive the courtesy of reply, nor did we receive an acknowledgement of the letter. And so that motivated us to send a second letter, which was sent out on January the 7th. Now, if I could just have the first slide, please. So there it is. On December the 4th, we sent a letter to the mayor and council, and we provided our unequivocal legal opinion that it was council's right to deny without legal liability Xinyi's proposal for a cost-sharing agreement of approximately $6 million. Now, just yesterday, we received a response from Ms. Thompson, the CAO of Stratford, and in her reply, she said, and I'm quoting verbatim from her letter now, that to the December 4th, 2020 letter, there was no response from the city because, and I quote, there were no questions set out in that letter. That is false. I've drawn a verbatim portion of the letter of December the 4th, and it asks how much particulate matter will be emitted, how much CO2, how many other pollutants, in particular greenhouse gas emissions. So we did ask explicit questions of the mayor and council in that December the 4th letter. We got no reply whatsoever, No acknowledgement, no answers. This is not appropriate. In my respectful submission, this is the city playing games with the livelihoods of its residents. If we can go to the next slide. So on January the 4th, we sent a follow-up letter that asked 7 specific questions. And just yesterday, we received a reply from the CAO to that letter. If we can go to the next slide, I'll present the questions. These were the questions that were put to the mayor and council. And then in the subsequent slides, I'll be giving you some excerpts of the answers and some commentary, including my legal opinion. The first question: has the city signed a binding agreement with Xinyi Canada Glass Limited, committing the city to the facility? 2, if the city signed a non-binding agreement, will council put forward for a vote a resolution to deny its support for the Xinyi facility? 3, if not, what are the conditions Xinyi must meet to win council approval? 4, will council disclose the non-binding or binding agreement it signed with Xinyi and disclose the city's request for additional information being requested from Xinyi in response to the questions asked by council to the public for the December 14, 2020 posting on the city's website? 5, were any of the requests to Minister Clark excuse me, for an MZO authorized by council? If so, was the decision made to issue the letters made in public or in camera? 6, what are the greenhouse gas emissions of the proposed Xinyi facility? That's the second time we've asked that question. And 7, will council allow residents to post responses to Xinyi on the city's float glass plant webpage? So if we can turn to the next slide, we did receive some answers from the CAO. The first 2 questions are essentially with respect to whether the city has bound itself contractually to accept the Xinyi proposal. The excerpt from the CAO's letter in response is: the non-binding letter of intent entered into by Stratford was replaced with a binding letter of intent. And that is all the information that's provided in terms of what the city has bound itself in terms of contractually to Xinyi. Now, since the news of this new binding letter was only posted to the website on December the 31st, this begs the question, or really makes apparent, that a binding agreement was signed between your mayor and your council with Xinyi sometime after December the 1st, and the question is why? Stratford, in fact, is refusing to tell its residents when the new binding contract was signed. And again, the question is why? What seems to be the case is that the city council has said that Xinyi will now consult the public and answer valid questions. City council will furthermore then hold a public meeting at which time a vote will be taken amongst the mayor and council. That is not the way that these types of agreements are entered into. Typically in a municipality, you will have an agency like Invest Stratford go out and find a willing partner in terms of relocating an industrial facility. At that point, there's a public consultation, and if the city is interested, per the expression of interest from residents in particular, they will be entering into a non-binding letter of agreement, which will typically set out a process that must be followed, leading ultimately to the commitment of a binding agreement. But that binding agreement, in my experience, is never signed until the public has been properly consulted, and so that councillors, before they render their vote, can hear from residents. That's before any binding agreement is signed. That doesn't seem to be the case here in Stratford. We can go to the next slide. Questions 3 and 4 were questions with respect to a request for disclosure. Essentially, will Stratford disclose the agreement and information requested of Xinyi? From the CAO, we got this answer. The non-binding and binding letters of intent were considered and executed at in-camera sessions. The city says that residents need to launch a freedom of information request to get that material. My respectful submission, this is contemptuous of residents. Why the secrecy? If this is such a good deal for residents, including the $6 million that we paid out of your pocket, residents should be able to judge that for themselves by reading the details. The information, if it is to be acquired through the Freedom of Information process, will take months to obtain. In other words, unless this vote is taken many, many months from now, allowing for residents to obtain this material, council is going to force a vote on residents in a context in which residents don't get to see any of the details that are part and parcel of the agreement. This is highly unusual in my respectful submission. Now, with respect to the in-camera sessions, I'll render my opinion right now on whether I think that that material should have been approved in an in-camera session. Under Section 238 of the Municipal Act of Ontario, there are eligible exemptions that can be invoked by a mayor and council to exclude the public and to conduct the meeting in camera, or as I like to call it, in secret. But those exemptions are very tightly circumscribed. They include, for example, the security of property, personnel matters, the sale or acquisition of land, labor relations, litigation, or any solicitor-client privileged material. In terms of entering into a binding agreement and requesting information, there's no way that that should fit any of those exemptions under the Municipal Act. We can go to the next slide, please. Now, the MZO request to the province. How was it arrived at? The CAO, again, would not provide any information with respect to the generation of the MZO. She said that the FOI also applies to the MZO information request. In other words, if you want information regarding how and when your mayor and council requested of the province an MZO circumventing the Planning Act and public consultation process, you are being advised that you have to make a submission under the Freedom of Information Act. That will take months and months if you get the information at all. Now, what this means is that the MZO request from your mayor and council, that is the one that was made, was done in secret. This is not what the Ford government has promised. The Ford government, through Minister Clark, has said MZOs will only be issued under the condition that a request came from the mayor and council. Implicit in that is the guarantee that there would be a full public debate before a municipal council, on behalf of its residents, would request the circumvention of the Planning Act process. Now, again, I take the position that the CAO is fundamentally wrong in this submission, that an FOI is required to obtain this material, and it's my respectful legal opinion that there should have been no exemption granted under Section 239 of the Municipal Act to allow this mayor and council to circumvent the public consultation requirements of the Planning Act by invoking any of the exemptions. Is an MZO request to pave farmland and to promote Stratford's largest industrial facility, which will be its largest greenhouse gas emissions? Does that sound like it fits one of these exemptions? The security of property, a personnel matter, a labor relations matter, the sale or buying of land? Obviously, it does not. I think it was improper for the mayor and council to go in camera to seek this MZO, to go around behind the public's back to make this request. This is something that should have been done in the full light of day and in full public view. We can go to the next slide, please. The GHG emissions. Now, on February 10th, 2020, the city of Stratford declared a climate emergency. And it told residents through its submissions that the GHG emissions would be something that they would very seriously consider, and that also that they would take immediate steps to reduce the carbon footprint of Stratford. They called it naming and framing the issue. And so twice now, our firm has asked the city of Stratford, its mayor and council, to provide information with respect to the emissions of greenhouse gas emissions, which are always expressed in a number of tons, metric tons. In answer to these two requests for information, the CAO replied, greenhouse gas emissions can be asked directly of the company. That's preposterous. If approved and built, the Xinyi float glass plant will be the biggest industrial facility in Stratford history. It is fair to conclude from the CAO's response that the city does not know, or perhaps it doesn't care, how much CO2 will be emitted into the air. I find this frankly shocking and disturbing. There is no way your mayor and council should be allowed to get away with obscuring or hiding or avoiding the question of how much CO2 will be emitted by this plant. There is no way they can avoid responsibility for asking these questions. When you go to the city's website, there's a question there regarding greenhouse gas emissions. What are the greenhouse gas emissions? The response is provided exclusively by Xinyi. And the answer is that there will be the avoidance of emissions by shortening travel distances and other means of reducing their carbon footprint. But that is the exact opposite. That is the antithesis of declaring what is the greenhouse gas emissions. Nobody, no one on earth calculates greenhouse gas emissions by talking about how you offset those emissions through other means like reducing travel times. It is inappropriate and it is not fair to residents. And furthermore, by allowing Xinyi to have a platform on the government's website, it's my opinion that the mayor and council, the city of Stratford, are acting as a cheerleader for Xinyi. This should not be allowed. The public would easily think, going to the website and reading that answer, that the city has blindly endorsed the answer of Xinyi. It's posted on the website. It's accepted by your CAO, by staff, by the mayor and council. This is wildly, wildly inappropriate as we suffer through a climate emergency. If I can have the last slide, please. And so our seventh question to the mayor and council was, since the mayor and council and staff are permitting Xinyi to put verbatim responses to public questions on the city's website, would the city of Stratford allow Get Stratford and its experts to also post responses on the website? Clearly, in the case of GHG, for example, this is an inadequate answer and someone should be able to point that out, like, for example, Get Stratford. After all, you're the ones that pay for the website. The CAO's answer to our question about whether the public would be allowed to post to the website was, the city will not allow residents to post responses to Xinyi Canada without providing a reason. This begs the question, why not? Xinyi puts whatever it wants on the city's website. It doesn't appear that there's any vetting of the answers. If there was, the city would have asked Xinyi for a direct answer to our 2 times asked questions, what are the GHG emissions? And again, Xinyi very much looks like it is getting the endorsement or that the answers have been vetted and approved by city staff. Whether they have been or not, we don't know. And the city has refused to answer our questions about the vetting process regarding what can and cannot be posted on the website. Again, I think it is inappropriate for residents who pay for that website to be subjected to the verbatim answers of Xinyi without an equal opportunity to reply. Last slide, please. Several conclusions can be drawn from the reply of the CAO from January 6th, which in my opinion is wholly inadequate. First, it is clear now that the process leading to the binding agreement and the request for the minister's zoning order has been conducted in secret. The city can call it in camera if it wishes, but it's been done in secret. This includes extraordinarily the request for the MZO that by no stretch of the imagination, in no possible way, could be considered eligible for an exemption under the Municipal Act. That MZO should have been debated in public and it wasn't. And the mayor and council need to explain themselves. Similarly, the terms of the deal have not been disclosed. And the city's response that an FOI will take care of it is frankly disrespectful to the public. The CAO knows that a freedom of information request will take months and months to retrieve the information, whereas City Council is pushing this decision along to a conclusion in the next several weeks or a few months. Now, what it looks very obvious to me is that a deal was signed after December the 1st, 2020. Well, that was during the period of the public outcry. The public wanted information, it wanted answers. And the mayor and council is refusing to give them, refusing to disclose information, and directing the public and our firm to the freedom of information request, which it knows will not deliver the information to the public. To me, this is disrespectful and contemptuous of residents and public participation and public engagement, which I guess was the purpose of seeking the MZO. Finally, the GHG emissions, something critical to the well-being of residents, to all Canadians, and to all residents of the globe. Those GHG emissions are currently unknown to residents, it appears they are unknown to the city. Why else wouldn't they divulge them? Xinyi's response on the website is disingenuous, but is purposely in keeping with the type of answer one would expect from a company that is part and parcel of a dictatorship from the Chinese Communist government. Now, it frankly defies all explanation to me why the city of Stratford in the province of Ontario, being part of the nation of Canada, would conduct itself in a secret manner without disclosing basic information to residents. The only explanation that I can come up with is that in their partner, in Xinyi, that's asking for $6 million from local residents, that its partner that has requested that it be done this way, and that the mayor and council have acquiesced. I think that's shameful, and I think that the city should reconsider its position. And I especially think that the city should take another crack at answering those 7 questions and try to answer them satisfactorily this time. With that, those are my submissions. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, David. Now, folks, I'm sure you're reading along in the chat box, and you'll see that there are many, many reactions to what David has presented, in addition to what was presented by Mike. And there are many questions towards mayor and council posted in the chat box. And there are some questions, David, which are legal questions. So what I'm going to do is, in kind of in no particular order, I'm going to try and take some of them as they were posted, ask you some questions. There's kind of a big question that I'll ask you at the end, but I'm going to give you some advance notice of it, which is, are there any other legal actions Get Concerned Stratford and the residents can take to stop council? And people have made a variety of suggestions, but we'll save that till the end. And then we're going to ask the mayor if he wishes to address any of these issues. So in starting off in no particular order, Manfred would like to know precisely what consequences legally and financially for the city the letter of intent being changed from non-binding to binding means. Can the city be sued because it now has a binding letter of agreement? Can you comment on that?
I can. With all due respect to the mayor, who I know is on the line, and to council and the CAO, I don't entirely trust the answers that you've been given so far and the answers that we've been given to our letters. But it does state explicitly in the letter from the CAO that even though the city has signed a binding agreement with Xinyi, one of the conditions of fulfilling that agreement is that the city give Xinyi $6 million in the cost share agreement. And so per the face of the letter, per the words of the CAO of the city of Stratford, if they can be trusted, it seems that legally, the city of Stratford simply needs to deny Xinyi its millions of dollars in the cost share agreement, and that would absolve the city of Stratford of any legal liability whatsoever. That's on the plain face of the letter from the CAO.
So David, this may be the variation on the same question, but I'll ask it anyway, from David Mackey. What is the cost to the citizens if the city commits to something the citizens don't want?
Well, that raises the issue of bad faith, obviously. I can tell from many of the responses to the presentation so far this evening that most residents either, all the comments I've seen, residents don't want the facility. And in particular, residents don't feel like they haven't been consulted, and that is factually the case. So the question is, how did we get here to this moment where the city may or may not be contractually obliged to proceed with the facility? Now, I don't know what those obligations are. I don't know what the conditions are that need to be met. I don't know what's in the binding agreement, and I can't really help people to discuss this facility in any specific way, not knowing the terms of the deal. I'm shocked that at least the deal outlined wasn't disclosed to the public before council would enter into any kind of agreement whatsoever with Xinyi. But the bottom line is, per the CAO for the city, and the mayor can confirm this, that binding contractual agreement with Xinyi is dependent, really entirely dependent, on whether the city gives Xinyi the money or not. And apparently, if they don't give Xinyi the money that it wants, then the agreement is null and void. And I think that's critical that the mayor confirm that.
David,
Otherwise, and I have to say otherwise, if that's not the case, then this is a charade. What's the point of everyone wasting their time being consulted, asking questions of Xinyi, asking questions of the city? If the city is committed to this facility and there's no way out without significant legal liability, then we're all wasting our time here and we've been set up.
David, there are several variations on the same question, so I'm going to just kind of read 2 or 3 of them out to you, and then you can, I think, respond to them in bulk. Is there a basis to launch a class action suit against the mayor and or the city of Stratford? Can we take them to court? Is there some mechanism in the law that allows the citizens to take their mayor and council to court? Can we launch a lawsuit against the council that would cause a deferment of the vote? Can we seek an injunction? Did I say class action suit? Yes. Can we go for a non-confidence motion in the council? There may be other variations. That there's lots of suggestions like that. David, do you want to speak to that kind of in general, please?
Certainly. With respect to a class action, that typically can only occur once damages have been occurred. It's very difficult to claim for anticipatory damages. On the other hand, an injunction or a claim for malfeasance of public office or a tort in bad faith, those are all options for residents. Now, certainly the city should be given one more opportunity to answer the very, very fair and clear questions of residents with respect to what happened with the transparency in this piece. But if the city refuses to answer those questions and residents feel sufficiently aggrieved, then yes, I think it is there's a substantial a possibility or substantial reasons for residents to consider and possibly execute litigation.
David, I think the only other question I'm going to ask from the list here is a question regarding a referendum. Can there be a referendum? Can the citizens force a referendum on council? I mean, they could ask council for a referendum, say this is very important, but could they force council in some way to hold a referendum?
So again, I am shocked at the way that Stratford City Council has conducted itself in this matter. As you know, Mike, we are both consultants, we're legal counsel to a group up in South Bruce Township that are the desired location for a nuclear waste deep rock burial facility. But one of the initial and really most important conditions in the Nuclear Waste Management Organization asking that council and those residents to consider the facility to be located in that municipality was that there be a willing host community as demonstrated by, amongst other things, a referendum amongst residents. In other words, those residents will not be subject to that facility until there has been a demonstration that the community is a willing host. Now, the community has got some work to do in terms of getting the referendum, but the poll that has been undertaken by the Wellington Water Watchers and by you, Mike, is clear that the public doesn't want it. And that really ultimately will bind council. And so the facility should not be located in that area. What strikes me as highly unusual and inappropriate is that there's been absolutely no discussion of what that threshold would be for Stratford to be considered a willing host community for something that is clearly going to either double or triple your greenhouse gas emissions. That alone, I mean, forget all the labor standards and the implications about the human rights and the way this thing has been negotiated in secret. Forget all that kind of stuff. I mean, just in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions alone, this council should be extending to residents a mechanism to ensure that the community's voice has been heard before anybody signs any more binding agreements.
Thank you, David. I'm going to ask you one more specific question from the list, and then I'm going to ask Mayor Mathieson if you'd like to make some comments. And this last very specific question is, do the mayor and council have any personal liability that may be pursued in court?
That would be dependent on how the mayor and council have conducted themselves. As I have suggested already, because it seems like the majority of council's business has been conducted in camera, which I don't think, in at least the case of the MZO, with certainty. And really, with respect to negotiating some of these deals, again, I don't think it fits with the exemptions under the Municipal Act. It will depend on how the mayor and council have conducted themselves. And at this precise moment, I can't give you an opinion on that because, like you, I just don't know what they've done here.
Thank you, David. Thank you for your presentation. There's comments in the chat box you may want to look at in addition to the ones we've raised. There's appreciation for you for the clarity of your presentation. Mayor Mathieson, are you with us still? Do you wish to speak? Would you please enter a comment in the chat box indicating if you'd like to speak or if not? We're going to wait a moment or two for you to make a comment.
All right, Mayor Mathieson, you've been made a co-host, so you should be able to unmute.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the opportunity. And I want to thank Mike and Melissa for inviting me to speak this evening. I've had a number of meetings with Mike and Melissa, either in person or on the phone. I will say, and I appreciate very much Mr. Donnelly's opinion. And I think we all know that the city, like anyone else, has solicitors that have opinions. And while Mr. Donnelly is entitled to his legal opinion, we have a veteran municipal lawyer that has her opinion on what is permitted and not permitted. So that's all I'll say on that, because I think, like anything, we can all find different perspectives to come to this. This economic opportunity came to the city in the early fall of 2018. And through that period, it was in a transition between one council to the next. And from September into November of that year, Rob Horn, our former CAO, worked with the province to ascertain a number of elements with regards to this. It was, as you can imagine, and I know there was something made about the 3 letters leaked or released by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing with regard to this. I just want to assure you that in a $400 million transaction that started on a trade mission organized by the province and the federal government, you can imagine there's more than 3 letters from the city to them. I say that to you because I think it's important to put things into perspective. And I will not deny that those 3 letters were written, but they represent just a small fraction of the correspondence that goes on a large investment such as this. And the federal government and province are far more involved in these types of discussions. So whether it's about the 2 Michaels, the geopolitical matters, no investment is considered by any municipality in this country, let alone Ontario, without seeking the guidance and advice of senior levels of government. And I say that so that you understand that City of Stratford didn't head over there at any time and just stumble upon Xinyi. With that said, I saw one of the questions in the chat box is with regard to whether or not, how many times I'd been there and who had covered the cost of those. And I can assure everyone that the City of Stratford had covered the cost with no contributions, either from the federal or provincial government or any private interests such as Xinyi. I will tell you that the City of Stratford entered into a non-binding LOI. And I'm being careful with what I say because I want to, just like you, I'm a taxpayer here. I want to protect the interests of council to be able to make a decision on this file without at any time opening ourselves up to litigation. The City Council does have an opportunity to review the cost sharing measures and have to formally approve any agreement in open session. And they are subject to being able to do that without any encumbrances. So I want to assure people that there's not limits on what we can and can't do. So I want to assure you that. Early in this discussion, there was a comment made with regards to where the votes fall. And I would say that while they were described, they may not be accurate. And I want to caution everyone not to believe that the vote is one way or the other. I will believe that all 10 members, including myself making 11, that there is a very genuine interest in what represents the best interest in the city so far. And I know it's characterized that I'm on board and this many people are on board and those many people are against. I would say that to be cautioned not to assume that's the case. You should assume that all 11 members of council will vote in whatever way they feel is appropriate based on the information they're going to receive over the next number of weeks and if not months. There are lots of questions that have been raised. First, I want to describe the cost sharing agreement as being one that represents the fact that the city annexed through a public process 350 acres of land into the city. When we did that, it went through a full public process. We had a justification report stating that it would be for industrial purposes. And during that period of December of 2019 through till mid 2020, around July, there were a number of articles. Not only was it a public process, there were no less than 6 newspaper articles about the land coming into the city, and Xinyi was mentioned as a possible industry for all of them. At the public meeting on January 16th of 2020, there was a discussion with regard to whether or not Xinyi, that was the first question asked by one of the attendees, and it was stated, and it's in the minutes for everyone to see, that Xinyi could possibly be one of them. You can imagine as we work through this that the province is heavily involved in discussions through the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade and any other relevant ministries. The city of Stratford, when it comes to regulatory items such as greenhouse gases, transportation matters as it reflects on roads and highways, rail as it reflects on traffic that is regulated by the federal government, investment as it relates to foreign direct investment that needs to go through the federal government. All those people play a role in this before council even considers it. I can tell you that we are working with those government agencies, whether it's Invest Canada, whether it's the Ministry of Economic Development, Innovation and Science at the federal level that controls foreign investment, the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade, the Ministry of the Environment, Ministry of Transportation, the Premier's Office, Municipal Affairs and Housing. All of those are consulted and continue to be consulted with regards to information that has been raised. Council is asking genuine questions. We're making sure that we ask information that is relevant to the development so we can understand it. I want to tell people that as you think about past economic announcements that have happened in the city of Stratford, whether it be the RBC data center, Xinyi Canada coming to Stratford, or any number of other industries, we don't hold public meetings prior to them making their announcement they're coming. We check boxes like, do they meet the Foreign Direct Investment Act? Will they be licensed if they have emissions under Ontario regulations, and do they meet them? All those types of items. So I want you to know that we rely on senior levels of government for their information, whether it be Immigration Canada with regard to foreign workers, temporary foreign workers, whether it is with regard to licensing of emissions, carbon footprint as it would go to the Environment Canada, all those items. And I say that because the city of Stratford doesn't have the capacity to make a number of those decisions. We don't have scientists on our staff, and we believe that's the role of the senior levels of government. With regard to binding non-binding, I will say that the non-binding letter of intent is how most agreements start. And at some point they go to binding, but they always, for the most part, allow some exit clause at some point. It was not signed in the period from the time Xinyi said that they were willing to come here and now, which was late October of 2020 and now. So I want to put that out to everyone so that they know that there was no agreement signed in that period. It goes back beyond that. What I will say also is that as it relates to council's interests, all members of council, and I think it's important to note, early on in this discussion, And I've had lots of meetings with Ms. McKenna as well from Wise Communities with regard to this. I did reach out to the Integrity Commissioner myself and asked him to look at my role in this. And I can tell you that council speaks as one voice. Not every time we make a decision do all of us agree on everything, but the majority does rule the day. And I have not signed any agreement because that is not the typical way it happens. The CAO on behalf of the city enters into those agreements, and they do so at the direction of the majority will of council. We have not put ourselves in a position that any decision we make or determine between now and the time this comes forward leaves us, I believe, to legal liability. With regard to the land, I saw that question come up. The city will not own that land at any time. The city did not want to enter into a purchase and sale agreement with any landowner to own land that may not be or possibly not be developed. So I can assure you that we've tried to make sure that we protect ourselves from owning land for industry that may not come. With regard to the cost sharing agreement, the $6 million does not represent a contribution from taxpayers to put Xinyi here. It represents a contribution to service all 350 acres that have come into the city. The balance of the land not used by Xinyi that could be developed, whenever they were to be developed, they would have to pay their share of that $6 million back to the city plus carrying costs. So those lands cannot be developed in the city without paying for their share of the servicing. So in the end of the day, no matter how long we have to carry it, that would be how the city of Stratford recoups its $6 million or whatever the cost sharing agreement identified. I will tell you that is no different than how we develop subdivisions through development charges agreements or industrial lands that we currently had in the Wright Business Park area. The clerk of the city of Stratford and the CAO determined the best way to deal with any question that came forward was to post it to the city website and to try to collate like-minded questions to provide one answer so it was consistent. It was not done in an effort to do anything more than try to make sure that there was a consistent theme and answer to the questions, and that has been done. With regard to Mr. Donnelly's first letter, it was believed that it was asking questions, or sorry, making statements as opposed to asking questions. And that was why it wasn't. It was not done in an effort to ignore. And I've spoke to Mr. Sullivan and Ms. Verspieten after that. And if there was any misunderstanding, I understand, but that was not the intent of anyone. With regard, and I saw a comment about flooding members of council, with regard to information or emails, I think what I would tell you is that the ones that have the best impact are the personally written emails that cause members of council to read all of them and to reflect on them and to ask themselves questions. When computer generated emails are sent in, they probably don't register as well as thoughtful questions, emails, letters, phone calls that are made by individuals. And I think that's important for you to know that, because if you're wanting to really get your point across, I think every one of you taking time in a respectful, thoughtful way to put your comments forward really allows people to think about it. Computer generated emails, maybe not so much, especially when you receive lots of them. And it maybe numbs people to believe the impact that they could or cannot have. And I just say that for people to get that. And with that, the greenhouse gas questions have been raised with regards to the science around that and how they're calculated. I do know that, and the water question have been asked by council and are under active and careful consideration. With that said, I want to thank everyone with regard to it. And I know that there's been lots of dialogue over this, and I'll just, I thank everyone for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mayor Mathieson. As you were talking, you'll see that there are many comments and additional questions. And Mike Sullivan is going to ask you a supplementary question.
Mute myself. There I am. So you stated that council will debate and vote on any agreement in the future in an open session. And that then implies that the agreement itself will be open. Why must you wait until that day to allow the public to know what that agreement is? That's been the problem throughout this now almost 2.5-year process, that the public knowledge is almost an afterthought by the city. And I know you're going to say that's not how you roll, and I hear you, but the fact is, you signed a letter in November of 2018, and the city didn't say anything about it until October of 2020. And so the public now, you and the website points out, well, there were a bunch of newspaper articles. That's not the same as the city announcing something. A bunch of newspaper articles is not a city admission that they're in the process of doing something. So I'll go back to my question. If council is going to be meeting and voting in open session, then can the text of this agreement be open now?
So, Mike, I would say this. Let me go back to the first part of restate your first question, and then I'll go to the last half. Sorry.
So you stated that when this finally comes up for a vote, it'll be in an open session. It won't be in camera. And so,
absolutely.
If the agreement is part of that open session, why can't the agreement be open now?
So, Mike, we are working within the bounds of the agreement, the non-disclosure agreement, to make sure that we give full public notice. And I gave you that commitment. It'll be more than a week. We will give lots of notice and put all the documents out for everyone to have the opportunity to see them. I will say this, Mike, and I want people to think about this. FIO Fataba is under its 4th expansion. We wrote a letter to the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade for its 3rd expansion. We don't disclose that to anybody. We work with lots of industries in Stratford with regard to investment here that we never disclose. And I say that to you because if you believe that if we told industry we were going to share their information publicly, most of them would be discouraged to deal with us. And whether it's a new industry coming or one that's here. So we follow the guideline of, if they are licensed and meeting the requirements under provincial and federal regulation, they are governed by all the legislation that's applicable, and they are a permitted industry within Canada, that is acceptable. If the public, and Ms. McKenna and I have this discussion, we will have the discussion again tomorrow morning, want to scope down what type of industries Stratford is going to look for in the future through Invest Stratford, then we should run a public process and discuss that and figure out how we do that. Lastly, which is important for us to remember, is no one is precluded from being involved as a citizen. Invest Stratford is a public board made up of citizens that sit on it and advise economic development in the city of Stratford. Now, they do come from certain sectors like manufacturing or downtown small business or other areas, but we do try to engage citizens on Invest Stratford's board as they set out the chart of where we're going to look for industry in Stratford.
Mike, are you done?
I think the mayor has said that the notice of the meeting will include the full text of the agreement, but it was was a little cloudy, but I think that's what he said. Can you confirm that?
Mike, the cost sharing agreement will be made public long before it's voted on. 2 weeks.
I'm not talking about the cost sharing agreement. I'm talking about the letter of the binding letter of intent. The cost sharing agreement, we know what that says. That's not the issue. The issue is, what have we got ourselves into with this company, and what are the guarantees of jobs? What are the guarantees of greenhouse gas emissions? What are the guarantees of a future phase? What it will look like? What are the guarantees of the number of temporary foreign workers? All of those things should be contained in some agreement between the city of Stratford and Xinyi, I would think. And why can't the public know that? So,
Mike, I'll take that back with regards to making sure that is considered and released. And I appreciate you raising that. I don't know of any legal impediment to do that, but I'm going to ask.
Thank you, Mayor. David Donnelly has a supplementary question.
I'm not going to take a question from a lawyer to myself. I have been advised by the city solicitor, if a lawyer wishes to ask a question, the lawyer should be governed by the protocol of the Law Society, which is they should ask lawyer to lawyer, not lawyer to client. So I'm gonna refrain on that, and that's protecting the interests of the city, not myself.
Thank you.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough, Mayor. So what I'll do is I'll put some questions out there, and perhaps someone like Mike Sullivan, who's a resident, may wish to put that question to you. That rule is invoked appropriately sometimes and inappropriately other times. So anyway, here's my question.
David, in the absence of the lawyer not being on here with me, and, well, I'm gonna limit my comments, because I can tell you that me being on here wasn't at the advice of the city solicitor, but it was out of respect for the invitation I was extended for the third time. That's why I'm here.
And I believe you, Mayor. I did call Ms. Lombardi. I've known Ms. Lombardi for decades. I both called her and emailed today and asked her to join me on the phone for a discussion so we could clear these matters up, and she was not available. But I did take steps to try and engage the lawyer, and she was not available. So the first question I have for Mike Sullivan, which he may wish to route through you, is, will you require Xinyi to post its greenhouse gas emissions? Will Xinyi disclose the greenhouse gas emissions to you, the city, and to residents? And if someone wants to ask that question, please be my guest.
And in fact, I kind of just asked that very question when I asked, what does the letter of intent include the greenhouse gas emissions? Does it include the number of jobs and when they will be filled by local people? Does it include the pollution that is not greenhouse gas emissions? What undertakings has Xinyi made? And I find it, the city asked Xinyi on behalf of residents, I guess, very, very specifically on that it appears on the website, what are the greenhouse gas emissions? And Xinyi spent 4 pages ducking that question. So you can understand our frustration, Mayor Mathieson, when it appears the city has allowed Xinyi to duck the question by making no further comment or no further instructions or no further question. We kind of know what it is. I mean, it's not going to come as a big surprise to anybody what the greenhouse gas emissions are. Those of us who've done the calculations ourselves based on the amount of natural gas that is required to light the furnace and keep it running for 2,000 tons a day of glass output. That works out to almost half a megaton of greenhouse gas emissions, which is more than 1.5 times what the city of Stratford now emits. It's not accurate because it's not coming from Xinyi, but one has to wonder why they duck it so often. They ducked it in their own, because I asked the question in one of their public meetings. I asked the question, somebody else asked the question in another public meeting, and they refused to answer the question. So Mr. Donnelly has put what I think I already asked you, which was, are we ever going to know what greenhouse gas emissions this company is going to admit?
So, Mike, I will say this. You've raised the question. It has been asked. Answers are being waited on. Of course, as you said, there is your rudimentary calculations, technology and furnace, scrubbers are all questions that have to be asked, and those types of questions have been asked.
David, do you have one last comment?
I do. First, I'm sure the mayor is aware that he could waive the requirement that questions be put legal counsel to legal counsel. That is always a client's election. Sir, I don't wish to put you on the spot, but you could certainly waive your right to counsel. The last question that I have to sort of put out there, and hopefully someone will pick up on it, is this. You said that you have a legal opinion that allowed you to go in camera to discuss these matters, and I absolutely take you at your word. But the way that the Municipal Act is written, and in fact, the way that the Freedom of Information Act, MFIPA, is written, it is actually at the election of the person holding the material or holding the meetings to either do it in public or to do it in camera. That's entirely up to you. It's your election. That's your choice. That's your decision. Now, you may have bound yourself to Xinyi. Xinyi may have required you to do these things in secret. But I have to ask Mike Sullivan to ask, since it is entirely your decision, your election, your discretion to have these matters held in public, will you from now on disclose all the information that's requested in our letter to you? And second, conduct all business in public and not in camera? Will you make that undertaking to residents?
So, David, that's a great question. I don't make those decisions. All 11 members of council as a majority do, and we follow the advice of the city solicitor. You know, I see text tonight about talking about wanting to class action sue the councillor members, the city, all those things. People have to realize if they can do that, it's the same as suing themselves. I put it in perspective of when we had the flood in 2002 in the south end of the city. At the end of the day, taxpayers suing the city is taxpayers suing themselves as a portion of that. I'm not going to say that we're going to waive that because I don't speak for the majority. And I think if you've ever been to a council meeting, and you have, you understand how the vote works unless it's recorded. The mayor is not voting on every issue. And I'm not going to bind my other 10 members of council to a discussion or a decision on the advice that they might receive from the city solicitor and how they might proceed. With that, I agreed to come on tonight, say as much as I could. And I believe I have. It's probably not enough. And I just saw a comment that I was avoiding the question or whatever. I'm doing so because I represent the entire city and I represent the legal interests of the city. And I'm not going to try to make any mistakes that are going to put us in legal jeopardy. So with that, I'm going to continue to meet with Mike and Melissa when asked and appropriate so we can continue the dialogue. I have a meeting scheduled with Ms. McKenna tomorrow morning where we'll have discussions, and I continue to take information from the public and from the groups. And I endeavor to try to respond to emails and return phone calls, which I have done over the last number of weeks and months, and I'll continue to try to do so in balancing it out. So with that said, I appreciate everyone.
Thank you, Mayor Mathieson. There are a wide range of comments in the chat box, which I'm sure you'll review, including appreciation of your taking time to speak to the group tonight. I'd just like to clarify something with you, which you may comment on before we transit to the next part of the agenda, which is you have indicated that to Mike and Melissa in previous meetings that you would give at least 7 days notice of intention to vote on this matter. will you hold a public consultation before that? We're very pleased that you came here and have been listening into the meetings and that you've spoken tonight, but we wouldn't want the council to think this is its official public meeting, which it could hold. So even before you give notice of intention to vote on this matter, will you hold a full public meeting?
Yeah, it is something that we've debated and discussed how to appropriately do it. It'd be great if we could all get in one big hall, spend 4 hours together. We've had lots of those in my time on public session. I'd like to find a way that we could do it, whether it's over Zoom or something, but it is something that's being contemplated and trying to figure out how best to move forward.
Thank you very much.
Okay, have a good evening.
Thank you. We're now going to move to the next part of the agenda, which is action plans going forward. And Lorena McKennett from Wise Communities is going to speak first and talk about her upcoming plans from her group. So Lorena, I'm going to ask you if you can turn on your video and your microphone.
The video.
And we'll give you the floor.
Oh, I don't know how to turn on the video.
You're on, you're on, and we can hear you. So even though you didn't know what to do, you magically did it.
Perfect. Well, thank you very, very much. And I would like to thank everyone for all the work they've put into this meeting tonight. And I'd also like to express my appreciation for the mayor to join us. I'm sure it's not been a very easy or comfortable thing sitting through this, but I think we're all kind of in a family and we're wanting to make sure that we all land as well as we can. With respect to our next moves, there's not a whole bunch, but we are going to be holding a rally on Monday under new arrangements because we know that there's a more serious lockdown. So we're asking people to attend virtually and to be sure and sign up to our YouTube channel for that. And also we're asking folks to drop some of their shoes or boots around to Falstaff during the day tomorrow or Saturday afternoon, because we hope to place them, or it's our intention to place them in the square, and that your shoes and boots will be standing in for you. So when you drop them off, please put them in a box, put your name on them, phone number, and we'll make an inventory of them. We'll also determine whether let us know whether you would like them back or if you would like us to donate them. But we would intend to keep them until we can have more people back in the square, or that this matter has been resolved. So that's primarily the rally on Monday. And I think the only other thing to mention is in a dispatch which we sent out last week was, and the mayor referred to this, is while we're still, at the same time while we're dealing with the sorting out of this last factory, we've begun to explore how can we improve a path forward in the future for these kinds of proposals, so that everyone feels that they've been given the proper opportunity and circumstance to examine them. So we're always looking for those kinds of suggestions, those tips as to what you would like to see in a future process that you think would make it stronger. And you can send that to us at Wise Communities. And that's it. Thank you very much, everyone, again, for all your fabulous work.
Thank you, Lorena, and thank you for your work and your leadership. Now we're going, Leslie Walker Fitzpatrick is going to join us, and it may take her a moment to get her to her computer and log on. And so I'm just going to talk for a moment while we wait for her. Leslie Walker Fitzpatrick and Peggy Coffey started, I think, 2 days ago to hold a vigil at City Hall between noon and 2. Each of them goes for an hour and stand in the cold, and they bring sign or banner with them, and they talk to people in the community who come by. And there's a link we've put in the chat box because you can sign up and join that vigil. We'd like to, this is their initiative, Leslie and Peggy's initiative. Get Concerned Stratford is promoting it, but it's their initiative, and they would like to invite people to join them to a maximum of 10 people per hour. And so you can see online how you can sign up and fill in for a spot there. and she's going to talk to you about what happens and how you can be involved. And Leslie, I'm wondering if you're there with us yet?
Well, Peggy Coffey and I have been talking for a while about how we can make the citizens' presence much more available in the downtown area on this issue. But first, I want to thank everybody who's doing such amazing work to fight this problem. In the darkness of this stressful threat hanging over our city, the light is to see how many people are coming together to fight this. It feels really good to be part of that. And so Peggy and I wanted to find ways to have the citizens' voice much more visible. And so we were talking about various ways to do that. And finally, we came to the conclusion, well, let's just start. And so yesterday, we started a vigil on the front steps of City Hall. We stood with our signs, and it felt so good. In fact, in Peggy's words, she felt empowered. People waved, gave thumbs up. There were conversations started about it. Sometimes it's lonely, sometimes you feel like you're invisible to people, but it felt so good to stand for this city, to stand and make our presence aware. So we're asking for people to volunteer to join this vigil. So we've started by being present at City Hall from noon until 2, Monday to Saturday. And there is a sign up sheet now on Get Concerned on the website. If you go to Vigil, and there's a box where you say, edit the document. Now, with the COVID rules and the lockdown, we can have up to 10 people during a block of time. It would be good if there's one person, but it would be better if there was a buddy system, so there were 2 people at any one time. Standing for an hour is, challenging at times in this cold. So make sure you dress warmly, you social distance, you wear a mask. But it's been quite a wonderful experience. I've had interesting conversations with people, a young guy on a skateboard that came by, people have come to visit, somebody bought me a coffee. So we're encouraging people, and I think it's a really great initiative in conjunction with the Boots and Shoes Project. So we'll really make the presence of the citizens right at City Hall where it's important. So if we can get more volunteers, we would like to expand the times from 11 till 3. But at this point, it'd be good to be consistently at noon to 2. It is cold on the front steps, although symbolically it looks very good that you're standing on the front of City Hall. When I was downtown a few days ago, I noticed that some wise person had taped up flyers, anti-Xinyi flyers all around City Hall, and sadly they were gone the next day. I did photograph them, so they're on my website. But this way, you can't peel the citizens off the steps, I don't think. So it is cold on the front. If that's too cold for some people, then by all means stand in Market Square at the back door of City Hall, and it'll make a really good show with the boots and shoes that are going to be there. Now, Peggy brought a folding chair one day. Standing feels good. So individualize what you would like, how you would like to be there. You can bring your lawn sign with you. You can individualize, bring your own signs, but be there, be yourself, and represent the citizens who are against this plant. We had some other ideas for the future. We'd like to get it solidly, sort of that vigil happening. Oh, and if you want to go down Sunday, nothing's going to stop anybody from having somebody go on Sunday as well, even though it's Monday to Saturday on the schedule. So if we can get this going strongly, and I think we should be able to, because so many citizens want a way to put their voice out there. The next sort of ideas we had was backtracking a little bit. During the first week of December, I did a climate vigil in the window of Agora Gallery. And it was quite a wonderful experience. I had a young woman run over and dance with me in the window. I was wearing wings because I was being a nature spirit, but I had a little girl come out and show me her butterfly dance. I had a young woman who was so moved by being a vigil for climate emergency that she put money through the mailbox door, which went to Wellington Water Watchers. So once we get the City Hall vigil going, we'd like to find a window downtown, whether it's an empty storefront, to have a place where people can sit in the warmth, people can individualize what they want to do, if they want to sing, dance, wear a costume, bring a poem, have signs. It's almost, when you're in a window like that, it was quite an interesting experience because it's almost like a little stage. And we being a theatrical town, it would be a great place for a lot of the artists in this town to make their presence known. We'd like all the artists of Stratford to come and rally and work against this plant. So if anybody knows of a window that might be available to us, we would set up a schedule for that. Individualize it. You could just sit calmly with your signs, or you could do whatever individual thing moves your spirit to do. It would bring awareness to the issue. Maybe at some point, people will come down to see who's in the window today or who's on the steps of City Hall today. Make sure you post about it. Put pictures out when you do a vigil time. It's a wonderful way for the citizens to make their voice known on this issue. And on the same page with the schedule to sign up, there's the information about all the students who fought to get that climate emergency resolution through City Hall. So it's very appropriate because with the greenhouse gas emissions, the sucking up of our water, in the middle of the climate emergency on this planet, it is just such a wrong and unwise thing to do. And on the planet at this time, it seems like we have to fight for our planet tree by tree, aquifer by aquifer, river by river, community by community. And we need clean air everywhere. There's no boundary to air. Mike also had a great idea that once we get the vigil really happening and starting at noon every day, that the citizens of Stratford could come out and bang their pots, because the vigilers will be first responders in a sense, bang their pots, make noise for 5 minutes at noon every day, so that the citizens' voice is audible as well as us being visible in the place. So calling all artists, calling all citizens, please join our vigil. Please help us find a window that we can set up a little mini location stage-like thing for us to draw attention to the issues for Stratford. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you and Peggy for getting this started. As you were talking, we were posting in the chat box how people could sign up for the vigil. We'll be sending the link out to people in an email, and it's also on the Get Concerned Stratford website. So in all of those places, you can sign up and be part of this. And we are in the last few 10 minutes or so of this meeting. The meeting was extended because we had extensive questions, and we were pleased the mayor joined us to make some comments and answer some questions. So that's extended the meeting. So I hope you'll stick with us for another 10 minutes or so. And if you have, Peggy, or sorry, Leslie mentioned, doing things on your own at home to support the vigil if you're not down there. So making noise is one example. There might be other examples, posting messages on Facebook Live, or pardon me, on Facebook at the time. And if you may have some other suggestions, and if you have them, please post them in the chat box as we're talking. I'd like to talk briefly now about the actions that Get Concerned is proposing. So as Melissa mentioned up at the top of the presentation, the next month is crucial. And we've distributed around to every home, business, and farm in Stratford. It's starting to be distributed a leaflet. And the leaflet includes some action steps. And so I'm going to ask if we can see the first page. We're asking you to make a New Year's resolution, to in fact make 2 New Year's resolutions. And the first one is a checklist that these are all the things you can do to stop the proposed Xinyi glass plant. Contact the mayor, contact the councillors, contact MPP Pettipies, and contact MP John Maiden. Display a lawn sign, write a letter to the editor, make a delegation to Stratford Council. Eventually this is going to get on the council agenda, and there needs to be delegations from many people, and to make a donation to Get Concerned Stratford. So when you get the leaflet, you'll see this organized as a kind of a checklist, and we're asking you to resolve to do as many of these things as you can. I think that the mayor's point is about emails is a good one. We deliberately did a kind of email generation a month ago. It was easy for people to click and send, so that it would give a quick indication to the councillors about the level of concern in the community. It would be a good idea, it's an excellent idea, to write a personal email to the mayor and councillors. It's a terrific idea to write a letter, to type or handwrite a letter and send it in. I did see many comments in the chat box, however, that councillors, not all councillors, are responding to everybody. But it is important to maintain the pressure, and also to maintain a visible opposition to the proposal. And the vigil's a great idea. The work that Marina's doing is a great idea. These are very challenging. The COVID pandemic is very challenging, and it poses obstacles to citizen participation. So it's important to have to be visible in whatever ways we can. And all of the information that you require to take these actions in resolution number 1 are on the Get Concerned website. We're introducing another action, and it's resolution number 2. If we can advance to the next slide. And that is actually for you to pledge that your decision on the Xinyi proposal will determine your vote in the next election. Now, there's actually been a lot of comments in a similar kind of way in the chat box through tonight's discussion. And so we've put the link in the chat box just now. And the link is also on the website, and we'll circulate it many times by email. That ask you as your resolution for 2021 to pledge your vote to councillors who vote no to the Xinyi proposal. That looks backwards. No, that's correct. Sorry, I'm getting to vote no, because to vote no to the Xinyi proposal is to vote yes to keeping Stratford green. So we would like to build that pledge now. We ask you to to take that pledge, and we're going to ask you to share that in your social networks. It's terrific that there's been as many as 600 people in these meetings. It's terrific that we know from the polling that we did that 2/3 of the community is opposed, but there's still, we want to reach out to those people and have people become active in communicating with and putting pressure on council to vote down this proposal. So it's really important that people, we circulate this as widely as possible. And you'll see that when you actually click on the pledge, at the end of that, you can share it in your email, you can share it on social media, through Twitter or through Facebook. So please sign the pledge and share it as widely as you can with as many people as you can. I'd like to speak just a little bit about another aspect of this. And I work with a number of communities on a number of campaigns, and I recognize that I'm a person who's from out of town. But I want to say this, politicians always say that they're independent and they're listening to everybody. And the mayor in his earlier comments encouraged us not to believe what we're hearing from councillors about their possible intentions to vote. And frankly, I think that's a bit of a fiction. I think that the information that we're getting from you who are talking to councillors and telling us is pretty reliable. And it seems that there are 4 councillors opposed, 3 or 4 in favor, and 2 or 3 who are undecided. Now, first of all, we should appreciate the councillors who are opposed, and somebody in the chat box asked earlier tonight if we could name those people, and we're choosing not to do that because we don't think it's our place to speak for those councillors. I have seen some of you posting in the chat box tonight who you think those councillors are based on the conversations that you've had with them, and that's fine. We think it's appropriate for you to share that with each other. But it really is important. While the community, the majority of the community opposes this, the politicians may, or a majority of councillors, may vote for it even against the wishes of their constituents. So that they really need to feel the pressure, and they really need to feel that there's a consequence for them if they vote for the proposal. Now, there's definitely going to be a personal consequence for you if the proposal is approved. And you've described it, and I won't repeat it extensively, but in the comments section, the comments you've made in the chat box have made it very clear how you are worried this will impact you. It will impact the quality of your air. It will impact the future security of the water that you have. It will affect the reputation and the experience of being in the town. So these are all consequences that you will experience if this is approved. And so I think it's completely legitimate for you to make clear to councillors the personal consequences for them if they are to vote in favor of this proposal. One of those consequences is what's behind this pledge to register your commitment to vote for councillors who vote no to the proposal and vote against councillors and candidates for mayor who support the proposal. But there are other ways to think about this too. And so I suggest that people think about the interests, the social and business interests that councillors have that you may support, and that you think about how to indicate to councillors how you will stop supporting them in their social or business interests if they vote for the Xinyi proposal. Now, I'd like to invite you to put some comments in the chat box while we're talking about this, but how do you feel about that? Would you feel comfortable withdrawing your support for the social and business interests of the mayor and councillors who support the Xinyi proposal? I'm going to watch the chat box to see what kind of comments we get. I see a couple of yeses already, sure, etc. And I'm going to watch the box as we talk. Yes, 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 yes. I'm seeing many yeses. And so and to do that, there are some questions that we need to ask ourselves. If you think about each councillor, do you see ways in which they have anything to gain personally as a result of the Xinyi proposal? Do you see, can you look at what the business interests or the social interests are of each of the councillors and see how you are connected to them and see how you can withdraw your support for those things and make it clear to them that if they vote for this, you are going to withdraw your support for their social and business interests. The reason that this is very important is that some of the councillors may say, oh, it's a long time till the next municipal election. It won't be till the fall of 2022. The community will just move on and forget about this by then. It won't hurt me. So it's really important that you communicate to councillors now what the consequence will be for them immediately if they vote in favor of the Xinyi proposal. So we're, again, I'm watching the clock, and you've been very patient, and you've been with us for a couple of hours, and so we're going to bring this to a close in a few minutes. But I'd like you to think about those things. If you have some suggestions about the social or business interest of the councillors to post in the chat box, that's fine. But we are going to convene additional meetings to have these conversations. The reason for it is this: we no longer have to raise awareness of the issues or convince the community that this proposal is a problem. The community is convinced. 2/3 of the community have made their mind up that they do not want the proposal to be approved. What we now have to do is convert that into pressure on the councillors to understand what the consequences will be for them if they support this proposal. So I invite you to think about that. I'm seeing there's comments. There's mostly in favor of that. There are some that have some disagreements. Fair enough. I'm from out of town. This is the kind of thing I recommend to communities when I work with them in different places. Different communities have different kinds of feelings about that. So it's going to be an important conversation for us to be having going forward. There's one more thing I'm going to talk about briefly, and then I'm going to return it to Melissa for closing comments and thank you. We just ask you for some donations. You've been generous up in the last month. You were very generous. December is a giving month, and we appreciate all the contributions you've made to a variety of issues and services in your community at this time of year. It's especially important as we all deal with the pandemic. So we're very respectful of the donations that you're giving to us, and we're working very hard to make good and efficient use of those. With the funds you have donated in the past, recently in December, we have paid for the printing of the 17,000 leaflets. We've been paying the lawyer to represent us. It costs $3,000 for the post office to deliver the 17,000 leaflets to the community. So that $3,000 is the amount we're trying to raise right now. In an email that we sent out earlier this morning asking for donations, we've already received $500 in donations, and that's terrific. Thank you very much for those of you who donated earlier today. We're still looking to raise $2,500 to pay the cost of the postal walk. So we're going to post in the chat box right now the link for donations. You can make a donation online here and get a charitable tax receipt. We will be sending emails to you afterwards, which will give you other opportunities. But I'd like to just take a couple of minutes and invite people to make pledges in the chat box. Right now, will you pledge $50? Will you pledge $100? Will you pledge $200? Will you pledge $500 to help us pay the bill to deliver the leaflets to everybody in the community? As you're making pledges, thank you very much. We're going to count them up, and we'll make a little announcement, not a little announcement, we'll make an announcement before the meeting's over. So please add your pledge in the chat box or go to the link online and make a donation. Thank you, Peter, for donating right now. We'll keep you posted on all that. It's been a very interesting meeting. And I'm going to ask Melissa if she'll join us to make closing comments and thank everybody for their participation. Melissa, are you?
Oh, yeah, I'm here.
There you are.
So it was another fantastic night. Thank you to everyone for coming out, and thank you to the mayor for speaking to us. We encourage everyone that hasn't already to like our Facebook page and check out our website, Get Concerned Stratford, and watch your mailbox for the latest flyer initiative that's headed your way. Please continue to call and email the mayor and council and have your voice heard. This is not a done deal. Thank you very much and have a great night, everybody.